Hello, in today's video I'm going to be talking to you about how to structure academic essays. And I will be talking at a somewhat basic level, so this video might be most conducive for those who are studying at undergraduate level. However, I must admit that even as a PhD student, when I considered the basics of the structure of academic arguments in an essay, it actually helped me quite profusely. And so I think that this could actually be quite beneficial for students at all academic levels. So generally speaking, an academic essay is composed of 3 different sections, and I think most of you will be somewhat familiar with these sections if you've ever written any kind of essay at any point in your life. So of course you have the introduction, which introduces the topic and indeed whets the appetite of your readers for what's to come. Then you have the body of your paper, which is the meat of the essay. It provides all the details of the argument that you're trying to make. And then of course you have the conclusion, which reiterates key points that you made in your introduction and throughout the body of your paper. Now, what is quite useful, and indeed what I'm mainly going to be covering in this video, is how these 3 sections connect. And this is the tip that I think is quite useful for all levels of academia. So when using this general structure, there are 2 key things that really ought to be included in your introduction. Now, as noted, an introduction does introduce your topic, and so in your introduction, you might have some contextualization, some background information, and some definitions of terms. But there are 2 things that are absolutely key that you must include in your introduction. The first is your argument. You must have an argument in your introduction. It is the crux of what your essay is about, and indeed this is what you are trying to persuade your reader to accept. The argument is absolutely key to a good academic essay, and indeed I'm developing another video on the importance of arguments in your academic essays, so please do stay tuned for that. Now, the second thing that's really important to include in your introduction is your pathway, and this is going to be how you're going to signpost the body of your paper to sort of bring out that argument that you're making in your introduction. And it's these 2 things, your argument and your pathway, that's going to connect your introduction, your body, and your conclusion. So let me show you an example. So let's pretend that my essay is about why all libraries should contain water slides. Now, my introduction will introduce readers to the topic, and as I said, it must contain 2 things, my argument and my pathway. Now, an introduction can also include contextualization and definitions, but it must include the argument and the pathway. So here's my introductory paragraph. You can see from the highlighted bit that I have started off with some context and definitions. So I say water slides have been around since the 6th century BC. They involve rendering a surface slippery. By covering it with a constant flow of water, this slippery surface is also placed on an angle and then utilized for fun in good times by pushing the body across the flow of water. So here I've defined and contextualized in my introduction. Next bit here, this is where I'm including the important aspects. So I've put my argument, which is highlighted here on the screen, as water slides ought to be installed in every library in the United Kingdom. Indeed, to do so would significantly raise their profile. So here I am emphatically making my argument, and that is the argument that is going to be carried through for the duration of this academic essay. Now, the second thing I mentioned as being important is the pathway, so how you're going to develop that argument throughout the essay. So here's my pathway that's highlighted on the screen. Firstly, it would whet people's appetite for the diverse offerings libraries provide. Secondly, people would be more inclined to use other library resources. And thirdly, it would bring communities together. Now, the body of your paper. And the body of your paper, as I already noted, must provide the details and some of the evidence for that main argument you made in your introduction. And indeed, this is where you're going to do most of your persuading. And as we discussed the pathway in the introduction, this is going to link to the body of your paper. So whatever number of pathway options that you use in your introduction, this is the minimum number of paragraphs you should have in your body. So if you had 3 signposts for your pathway in the introduction, you should have at least 3 paragraphs in the body of your paper. Let's go back to my example. So here are the 3 pathway points that I mentioned in my introduction, and indeed, I should have at least 1 paragraph per pathway point. So each of those points I mentioned should at least have 1 paragraph that's developed in the body of my work. But it doesn't mean I'm restricted to just 1 paragraph for each pathway point. I might indeed decide that pathway 2, where I talk about how people would be more inclined to use other library resources, I might decide that can be broken up into 2 subcategories, or 2 perhaps sub-pathway points. So that means I might have 1 paragraph for pathway 1, but then for pathway 2, I'll have 2 paragraphs, and then I'll have 1 paragraph for pathway 3. Now, the conclusion, as I noted, reiterates the key points that you made in the introduction and that you developed in the body of your paper. And so you are going to mention and reiterate the argument once again, which is the key foundation of your paper, and you're going to draw upon those pathway points again, but this time in hindsight, so reflecting on what you've developed in the body of your paper and incorporating some of that into your conclusion. Again, let's go back to the example. And here's my example conclusion as noted, which once again is going to reiterate my argument and summarize some of the key points I made in my pathway throughout the body of my essay. So you can see I've started with the argument. This essay demonstrates why the installation of water slides in all UK libraries would be hugely beneficial to raising their profile. And now I start to summarize some of the key points that I made from my pathway points within the body of my paper. So firstly, libraries which have diverse offerings are likely to attract more customers, as noted by the examples of the libraries which attached a zoo to their premises in Australia. Secondly, customers might be more inclined to use other library resources. Indeed, as books tend to be popular beach accessories, we can anticipate they would be sought with vehemence in a library with a water slide. So you can see I'm just building it up a bit more than what I had in my introduction, and in hindsight reiterating what I said throughout my entire paper with great emphasis on my argument and bringing out my pathway points. So that's everything I have for this brief video on outlining academic writing structure. If you'd like more information on developing your argument or the importance of arguments, the link for that will be made available attached to this video at the very end. And if you'd like more information on developing the actual paragraphs that go in the body of your paper, then please do click on the associated video that is linked at the end of this one, which will be on the process called the Peel method. Thank you for watching. If you found this helpful, please do subscribe to this channel so you can be kept apprised of any further videos on research tips. If you have any questions or recommendations for what you'd like to see, please do leave it in the comments below the description. Thank you.